Hey, welcome to the replay of 3 universal rules you can use to learn and study effectively. And they're really, really powerful rules, and we're going to go through them and have a little discussion, and I think you're going to enjoy them. So, the first rule is really to be all in. And this is something that you really want to understand. And if you're hopping on the live, say hello. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. I'd like to be able to engage with people, and it makes these things much more interesting. Hit that thumbs up to let me know you're engaged, and we'll get going with these 3 universal rules for how to learn fast, study effectively, and really understand how to keep it going, because that's the whole thing. So the first rule, again, is to be all in. Well, what does that mean? Being all in is something that you've got to just develop and cultivate and work on. And if you understand what that means, then you're already ahead of the game. So understanding what being all in means is that you've done a bit of research into the topic and you've looked at different angles. Who are the key players that are teaching in that area? Who do you want to learn from? Do you have a sort of plan, a strategy of how you're going to knock these things off so that you can see a bit of the larger picture? Now, you're essentially kind of creating a bit of a map. And we know that the map is never the territory, so you don't want the map to give away all of the details and never expect that it will. But you want to be all in terms of getting into that picture that you've created for yourself and then moving into it. And part of being all in is documenting the process as you go along. So this is really, really important. And again, if you're hopping on in this live, let me know where you are in the world, how you're doing, what you're thinking. Say hello and hit that thumbs up. And what do you think about this universal principle of being all in? One of the reasons why it's so difficult for so many people to learn is because they just are not committed to it. And being committed is really everything. And of course, we have an age problem where people just are, going into certain educational programs when they haven't had age enough to make proper decisions. I don't necessarily have a solution for that, but for adult learners who are struggling with a learning project, really they may not be all in enough. See, Magnus is here. Thanks for saying hello, Magnus from Norway. I love Norway. Really, really beautiful place. I went there on my honeymoon, and I appreciate you saying hello. Um, but yeah, I mean, so many people struggle because they're just not all in. And one of the things that I was very fortunate for when I went to university is that I'd already been a high school dropout. And so when I went back to high school, I was all in on going back to high school because I'd learned some hard knocks lessons from not being in high school, which is that, you know, uh, the future can look quite bleak when you don't have those qualifications, and they're not necessarily so. You can certainly become a billionaire entrepreneur without any of those degrees and so forth. But at the same time, there's just certain barriers if you're not of the entrepreneurial sort, and not everybody is, or not everybody is at particular stages in their life. And so what happened to me is that I went to my graduation, and went to the graduation of my year, and met the mother of one of my friends who has been a tremendous influence on my life. And she learned that I had dropped out of high school, and I was there with all my friends celebrating their graduation when I wasn't. Heard a little bit of my story, and she said, "What the heck are you doing? You should be a professor. You reading all these books, talking big thoughts all the time." While I was dropped out of high school, of course, I was reading the encyclopedia from cover to cover. So I'd learned a few things. It wasn't wasted time. But without a high school qualification, could never go to university. And I was actually working for the SPCA, licensing dogs, right? And I was physically ill. I also had another job at a bookstore called Buckingham Palace, where I used to get into arguments with my boss over the pronunciation of authors' names and so forth. And ultimately, I lost that job. But I was getting physically ill all the time, and even wound up in the hospital. And that boss was so strange. He came to the hospital to visit me while I'm laying there after a surgery, and that's when he gave me notice of that I wasn't going to be working at Buckingham Palace anymore. I mean, life is so strange and bizarre and cruel sometimes, right? When people do things like that. Just imagine the gall. I hadn't lost my gallbladder, but he certainly had the gall to show up when I'm recovering from surgery, and that's where I learned that I'm going to lose my job. But I think a lot of that physical illness came from not being in alignment, not being all in on a path, not having guidance, and so forth. So it was, Magnus says, quite an insensitive man. Yeah, absolutely, very insensitive. So, how can you be all in without knowing where you're going and how to get there and so forth? And all I knew is I loved knowledge and I was going to pursue knowledge no matter what. And so I was reading the encyclopedia, doing what I could, and to make things work, working these jobs, whatever I could get. And the one job that kept me connected to knowledge, I was in some sense too knowledgeable for. And but I'll never forget though that boss, he brought me a book called Voltaire's Bastards to the hospital, which was a very intellectual book and perfect timing for me then, and just odd, some of the oddest things in the world, but that go on in one's life. But in any case, so then I was at the graduation of my friends, and Celia told me, she said, you should be a professor. You have to go back to school. You have to graduate from high school. And more than graduate from high school, you've got to go and get your PhD. You just do. So here I am, a high school dropout young person. She gives me this call to adventure. And that's it. I've got it now. I got a call to adventure. I am all in. So I go back to high school. It was the most embarrassing thing in life to go and sit with these people who, at that age, you notice the difference in ages much more than you do when you're in your 30s and 40s. You really notice a year's difference in age between people. And I had to sit there, and I remember taking Law 12 and taking geography and all these grade 12 courses that I needed to take. And it was really, really painful. But I had a mission. I had a goal. I had even a symbol, a person, this wonderful woman who would appear again and again throughout the years to be this kind of guide. And well, not to be mystical, but this is one of the problems that a lot of people have, and we're seeing more and more in culture, especially with the fractionation of the internet, removing us from social contact or changing how social contact takes place, is that we have a less and less contact with our elders in the world who can notice and observe these things about us when we're off the path and sort of give us a sense of where to go, where we could land, and a mission, a call to adventure. We know this from the deepest stories in many, many cultures, that we need a call to adventure. We need a place to go. We need to be all in. And it's one of the universal principles and rules of how to study and study effectively, study fast, and to remember things, is that it's connected to a mission. This is often called in the self-help world your why. Find your why. Well, that's not enough though. You've got to find your why, and you've got to find who you are, who you resonate with, what your personality is, and so forth. And so this call to adventure came to me from a professor, was sort of the who, right? The who I could be. And she was very good at identifying that who that I could be. And you need to think about that for yourself. You may not have a fortuitous event where someone does that to you in person, but you can find it yourself. You can go looking for digital mentors and see, yeah, that's for me. That's the kind of thing that I can do. I do this to this day all the time. I'm just watching what other people do and say, yeah, okay, that person obviously has more knowledge than I do, and they're setting up this kind of symbolic structure that one could emulate and move towards, but you got to be all in. So being all in is the first of our three universal principles for how to learn fast, learn anything. I want to check in with the live. By the way, if you're hopping on this live, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are, who you are in the world, and what you're doing, what you're thinking. Magnus says, oh yeah, we covered that. Rajitha's here. Hey Rajitha, thanks for saying hello. Magnus asks, do you offer a course in speed learning? I've bought a couple of your books already. Well, my books are a course in speed learning. Thank you for that question, Magnus. They are about speed learning, and I'm going to get into this in terms of the universal principles of learning and why those books can be so powerful for you. Magnus follows up by saying, currently studying Chinese on my own. Well, I'm studying Chinese on my own as well, even though my wife speaks Chinese. We all study on our own. This is why we need universal principles like I'm talking about right now. nobody studies entirely on their own, but at the end of the day, we are all on our own in the things that we study. And this is just the most powerful thing to realize. It's not bleak, it's not glum, it's not upsetting. It is the power to realize that everything you do is on your own. When we get to the second and the third of these universal principles, you'll see how all of this fits together very, very nicely. But that's a power. So you're already set, and you just need to be all in. Now, if you watch the previous video that I released yesterday, I'm showing you my own Chinese adventure, my own journey, which is the phrase "我们离开以前，走了这个时." So, just by constantly repeating this, finding ways to use it and use it in speech and so forth, I'm reinforcing it into memory, but I'm on my own in doing it. My wife isn't going to make my mouth move. YouTube channel isn't going to make my mouth move. I have to do it, and I have to be all in. I have to say, look, I'm going to do this. Likewise with anything. Back when I was in university and I wanted to learn how to use my memory better, and I'd encounter a Greek phrase or something, well, got to be all in. Got to say, I have these memory techniques. I'm going to get this Greek phrase or whatever it might be into my memory, and I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to use these tools that I have been blessed through fortune and fate and chance and good luck to find. And then I'm going to use whatever free will exists, if any exists, to hop in and actually use these tools and be all in with them. Because having tools is nothing if you don't use them, if you don't apply them. So, Magnus, you're learning Chinese. I have a whole playlist of examples of me showing some of the images that I use in my head. And I say in my head, not in my eyes. And you want to, if you need examples, well, they're there. But you have to be all in, and you are you, and you're the only one who can do this. That's the most fundamental power. And you can find others, but it's you that finds others. And you find in yourself whatever it is in you that's needed to find those others who can help you along the way. It's really, really simple, but you got to be all in. So, Caroli's here. Hi, Caroli. Thanks for saying hello. Regards from Germany. Guten Tag. Want to memorize unregelmäßig, perfekt und Präteritum. Gut, gut, gut. Wir können im Moment nicht auf Deutsch sprechen, aber vielleicht kommt ein Deutsch YouTube-Kanal in die Zukunft. Vielleicht. But, if you want to memorize unregelmäßig or regelmäßig or regular verbs or irregular verbs, these are all covered in my books and video courses and so forth. You just got to learn the steps of the dance, right? So you start with this position, you be all in, right? As is our first rule, and then you start to do the dance. Boom, 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 boom. And then the movement happens, and away you go. But that's a great goal, and really quick, how I have dealt with in the past regular and irregular verbs is just to create 2 memory palaces. In each memory, pick one of the rules, because there's more than one rule, and it depends on how many of those rules are in the particular language, but just pick one to get started. So let's say it's just regular and irregular verbs, and you're going to pick one tense. Then you'll have one memory palace, and then another memory palace. Here's a bunch of maybe 10 phrases that have the regular verbs, then 10 phrases that have the irregular verbs. Get them drilled into memory using the miraculous and wonderful tool of memory techniques that allow you to just look at these phrases once or twice and get them into memory, get them into long-term memory using the memory palace. Then you'll have an intuitive understanding of what those rules are. And if you ever leave the language for a while and you need to go back to it, well, you've got a place to go back that's a lot stronger than the textbook because you've got your mind. But ideally, you won't leave that language behind. And I do all I can to speak German as much as I can to avoid linguistic de-skilling in German, but I feel the forces of that. But I'm also just astonished by the vocabulary that I still have, even if the grammar seems to slip sooner than the vocabulary. But nonetheless, it's just a matter of use. And but thanks for that, for letting me know about that goal, and I hope that little tip helps you. Rajitha says, from Sri Lanka and studying for the MD exam. Excellent, excellent. I really want to visit Sri Lanka. I'd love to go there. I think that it's an amazing place, and I've read a fair amount about it. So Magnus says, we'll watch that. Yeah, if you're learning Chinese, go watch my Chinese playlist. I don't know, I stopped doing it for a while because it was meant to create a particular outcome, which is people in my Chinese 30-day phrase challenge group. And then we did that. And so the full 30-day challenge is there, but I decided I'll revive that a little bit and do some more examples. So if you're not subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button. If you're showing up live, say hello, hit the thumbs up button. And if you're watching the replay, leave a comment below and check out these other resources. Linda says, oh, you got so many cool symbols in there. Well, anyway, you're doing Chinese too, and check that out, Linda, the playlist there. And if you want to join us, get the Chinese Vault that I talk about in the Chinese playlist videos. And even though the current Chinese challenge isn't there at the moment, or we're not doing it, the archive is there. You can go through it. I'll see if you add anything to it, and we can jam over whatever magnetic imagery you create. Andres is here. Hi, Andres says, good, 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 good. Magnus says, any hope of you producing a book on Chinese as you've done for French, legal terminology, etc.? You know, I am thinking about exactly how to do it, but because the characters are there and I haven't perfected Can't Mist, then I haven't done that yet. But Can't Mist actually is perfect, so perfection is just me using it to achieve a particular outcome, and then go from there. So I really want to be able to do not just Chinese pinyin vocabulary and phrases and so forth, but actually have the characters involved and reach a certain level of that. And you know, the first universal principle that we're talking about is being all in. And one of the challenges for me is to be all in with Chinese, and what kind of Chinese am I all in for? And you know, there's no rule, there's no governing body that tells me what kind of Chinese I got to be in for. I have to tell me what kind of Chinese I am in for. And really, the thing is I'm into speaking Chinese with my wife and her family and her friends, and just that's it. Like the classical Chinese that I'm involved with in terms of the Shigua Jifa, translating that into English, which is Matteo Ricci's book on memory techniques, that's classical Chinese. And you know, that has nothing to do with current Chinese. And there's a lot of riddles and puzzles and weird cultural references and puns and so forth and all of that. Like, it's not going to help my contemporary Chinese at all. And so the all in that I have for Chinese is really just daily, everyday life Chinese. I don't really see it taking it to social and political commentary the way that, you know, I might be able to speak in German or whatever. So that's the power of this first universal principle, is that when you're going to be all in, you get to define, and you have to define what being all in means for you. And a lot of people, they just they over-exaggerate what it is to learn something. Doesn't matter if it's a language, they over-exaggerate what it means. They think, well, I have to learn thousands of words and thousands of phrases and so on and so forth. And it's just not true. You have to learn what is sufficient to fulfill your goal, right? And usually that's a lot smaller than what you think it is. So when you hear all these things about getting fluent in 3 months or 6 weeks or 8 days or whatever the heck that it is, you got to understand that that word fluent is really flexible, and a lot of people use it in a lot of different ways. And in the fluency course that I created, it's you define what fluency means, but you have to define what fluency means, because you can't create the goal. You can't be all in to the goal that you create if you're not the person who defines fluency. And then you can't create the milestones along the way to the goal if you aren't the creator of that. No one is going to hand it to you. People can talk about it, they can make suggestions and so forth, but you have to be the hero or the heroine of your own life who says, aha, I get it. You have to have goals. You have to have milestones towards reaching that goal. And that goal might change as I get into the journey and adventure. I might go, oh, well, I got to do this. And then, you know, you might get sidetracked. Or, as we'll talk about in the other universal principles of learning, you'll be able to hold course. And that's a huge part of this, right? But no one's going to do this for you. No one's going to. You have to learn how to do it yourself. And some people are better guides than others. Some people are more honest and ethical in how they teach it. But at the end of the day, the teaching is You have to be all in, but you are the one who defines what being all in means. So this is really, really important. If you can get that, you're going to win. You're going to win in life generally. So Carol, he says, genau, dankeschön, which for those of you who don't know German, means exactly, thank you, or precisely. Andres is here. Greetings from Chile. You are awesome. Andres, you are awesome. Thanks for saying hello. If you're hopping on, say hello yourself. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Hit that thumbs up button. And Linda says she's from Ireland. Oh, I wish that I could spend some time in Ireland. I love it. This is making my day, bro. All languages, thanks. Excellent. Love. Go to Sri Lanka. Okay. Well, thank you for seconding Sri Lanka. I believe Michael Ondaatje, the Canadian novelist, is originally from Sri Lanka, and I love his books, and I love the whole idea of Sri Lanka. Kevin King says, I'm using these techniques to teach my students information technology and ethical hacking, so thanks, from New Mexico. All right, well, I'm glad that it's ethical, because that would be, it's like anything. These powers are to be used for good, but can also be used in ways that are not good. So please do keep it ethical, and please do, ethically speaking, if you're teaching them and you're learning from me, send them over to my channel so they can hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to this channel, and so forth, and keep this movement growing. We're in a mnemonics renaissance. The more people who are behind it, who show that they're engaged and who participate like you're doing, the better, and we can really make some things happen. Magnus says, thanks a lot. Thank you, Magnus. It's a really great question. Lars is here from Iowa. Lars, thanks for saying hello. We're going to get to the second point here in a second, but the whole point of these lives is to engage with you and discuss with you and say hello. So that I know is not ideal for the replay, but replays are cool too. I show up to them. I love, for example, Roberto Blake's replays. I watch them. I can't be at that same time because I have things like sleeping to do when he's over there in North America, but that's just the way it is. Replays are powerful. Rajita says, really helpful if you can upload videos how to memorize medical stuff like anatomy, physiology, etc. Thanks for that suggestion. You should get the book, How to Learn and Memorize Medical Terminology. You'll find that very useful. It applies to anatomy, physiology, and so forth. Search up on Google magnetic memory method and anatomy. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. One of the things that you got to keep in mind too is that the internet has forced us to use keywords to attract all these things to different things, but these techniques work for anything. So if you can figure out how to do it for one thing, you can figure out how to do it for other things, although there are differences. Those differences are sometimes microscopic, sometimes they are structural at a larger level, but at the end of the day, you've got to just dive in and learn them and make them for yourself. It's like this, actually. This is like the perfect cup to represent how learning is. Everything has a movement made of small movements, right? So if you focus on each of the small movements, before you know it, you'll have the big movements, and then you'll say, okay, so I learned this dance, and the process of the small movements leading to the large movement also applies to the next dance that I want to learn. It's just very, very simple. Okay, so our second law, well, let's catch a couple more of these comments. Megan says for Chinese, same with him, and for business use, yeah, business use is great. Linda is saying, say hi to your wife. Okay, well, I will. So, natural flows here. Guten Tag, natural flow. Thanks, bro, getting your book, says Linda. Excellent, really appreciate that. And Rajita says, thanks, Anthony, really helpful. Jindrar is here from Czech. Oh, I love the Czech Republic. I love Prague so much. Was there on my honeymoon. Have many, many cool memory palaces in Prague. I've been to Prague many times. I love it. Natural Flow says, my name is Chris. All right, I'll see if I can't remember that. Wonderful, wonderful to meet with you all. Okay, so the second rule that we have, which stems from the first, and the thing with these three universal principles, laws, whatever you want to call them, they're not necessarily in order, although getting them in order can be very, very useful. And the second one is speed of implementation and rhythm. So, speed of implementation, let's start with that. What is speed of implementation? If you have a guess while I'm talking, that starts to generate any definitions in your own mind, feel free to type them in. One of the ways that you learn is by thinking ahead of the person you're learning from and trying to formulate your own ideas and then see if they fulfill your expectations. It's a very powerful learning tool. And it's one of the reasons why still going to long form lectures, watching long form videos is so powerful, is because you can think in your mind to run in advance. Try to outpace your teacher and see if they actually go where you think they're going. And what that ends up doing is it enables you to either confirm your own brilliance or actually be surprised positively or disappointedly, but nonetheless you're still interacting mentally with the content and you're still arriving at a much more powerful outcome than, hey guys, here's my 20-second video where I'm going to cram into a top 5 list a bunch of stuff that you'll forget in 30 seconds. You know, like, this is not really good. This is not a positive thing that's happening on the internet. And some people complain, they say, oh, couldn't you make your videos like 2 minutes long or blah, 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 blah. Well, no, actually no. And the podcast needs to be longer, not shorter. And the reason for that is because you need to demonstrate thought in action, and you need to be someone who submits yourself to the demonstration of thought in action. You need to see it demonstrated. So I watch a lot of long form videos. I'm going to put a podcast together sometime this year with some examples of long form content and a longer discussion about this on the podcast and on the blog, so you can just have these videos collected together in a certain place if you want to watch them yourself, and what I'm thinking and doing and why that I submit myself to like 90-minute videos and 3-hour videos and so forth, because it's good for your brain. And 6-minute, 2-minute videos are not necessarily good for your brain. Although if you want them to be good for your brain, here's how. It's called a notebook, and it's called a pause button, and it's called digestion and capturing and digesting, and not just, oh, well, look at that, 6 tips in 3 minutes. Oh, no, you're retarding yourself if that's all you do, because we forget at least 90% of what we hear in short form, and the only way to make it more memorable is to capture it in memorable ways and to use memory techniques on top of that. And so long form, actually, if you submit yourself to it and you engage in the thought process, you're actually more likely to remember more naturally without any memory techniques, because you're engaged just in long content as such. So, and I'm pretty sure that if we get some brain scans going, I'll be able to validate that claim. In fact, I'm more than sure of it. I know it. It's already there. In any case, Chris says, create your own examples in different areas. Exactly. And find inverse examples. Kimberly says, thank you for sharing your wisdom. I'm new to your teaching, if you will, and totally interested. I will it indeed, though it is only for you to will, because you are you and I am me. Although, that's a good point, because I will this into existence by showing up. And that's the second universal principle after being all in, is showing up, but showing up in particular ways. Speed of implementation, and then rhythm. So that's very, very important. And you've got to understand speed of implementation. So what is speed of implementation? Well, it is essentially a law which we can generalize and be specific about at the same time. The general character of speed of implementation is you get an idea and you act on it fast. Some people have put numbers on this. So they'll have a 72-hour rule, they'll have a 48-hour rule, they'll have a 24-hour rule, or whatever. So what does that mean? Well, let's say someone says, you've got to read this book, right? So the rule of speed of implementation is you go, you buy the book immediately, and you start reading it, and you don't stop until you're finished, right? Because you're implementing with speed the suggestion. Otherwise, the longer you wait, the likelihood of you actually implementing goes down. And so what learners do who really want to learn is they implement on suggestions, and they do it quickly. They don't hum and haw, they don't wait around, they go and they get it done. So what that would look like is, okay, so let me think, what book should you read? Well, read, 59 Seconds by Richard Wiseman. The best learner will go, they will immediately maybe just have this open in a different tab. They're still listening to me talk. They're going to YouTube. They're like, Richard Wiseman, who the heck is that? What's 59 seconds? What's that? And then they're buying it. By the end of tomorrow, they'll have read it. They'll ideally better than that. They'll have some notes that they took from it, and then they'll be implementing the ideas from that. And you've got to, of course, have a filter, because there's millions and millions of book suggestions, and you've got to like pick on them. But you develop an intuitive sense and a practical sense of that's worth me following up on, but you don't just follow up on it, you actually do it. Now, back in the day when people used to go to the libraries a lot, that was quite easy, and it still is actually for a lot of us. I know it isn't for all people, but there's a library over there, and one of the ways that I follow this rule is when I hear something, I look it up. If it's at the library, I go and I get it into my hands, and then I read it. And I do have a certain speed reading process, of course, but generally I would just rather read the book, assisted by some speed reading techniques, but actually reading the book. I don't really think that speed reading is an alternative to reading books. It's a supplement to how to read books. And then I will take notes from the book in a particular way. If I want to memorize what those notes are, then I will use memory techniques, and it's just that simple. So that's speed of implementation, but it only works if you do it right away. So the chances are, the likelihood that it's going to get lost to the sands of time increases the more time passes. So I don't really think it's, 72 hours or 40 hours or 24 hours or 12 hours. I don't think you have that mathematical rule. It doesn't work, because every piece of information has a different sort of decay period. You've just got to understand that if you really, really want something, you've got to implement fast, and you've got to make sure you get it done. And luckily, we can do that online and offline, but libraries are still very, very underutilized places since the downward curve came. So get more in touch with your library. You'll be surprised by some of the things that are there for you. You'll be surprised by what librarians can do for you to help you with speed of implementation. And then you've just got to keep rolling. You've got to keep rolling. And then the second part of the second universal principle is that you've got to put rhythm around it. Put rhythm around it. So why that's so important is because once you've followed the rule of speed of implementation, then you've got to keep it rolling, right? So how do you do that? Well, when you pick up a book and you're reading it, and this is why Kindle sucks. Like, Kindle's awesome. I went through a whole Kindle period, read like crazy, but it's also why it sucks. And that's because when you're reading books that have lists of citations, other books at the end, it's very difficult to just constantly go back and forth to the index, to the list of works cited, and just go, okay, that's what I'm going to read next, that's what I'm going to read next, and so forth. When you're in an actual library, you can go and immediately practice speed of implementation by saying, this guy's referring to this, I'm going to go to that. It's just a chain of associations. People think that hypertext was new with the internet. No, it wasn't. It was always built into scholarly architecture for a very, very long time, called bibliography. And in a good library, even a bad one, bibliography allows you to follow a chain of association through links, through, okay, this guy's referring to this person, and so now we're going to follow this up. We're going to continue. This is really, really super important, and you can do it to this day. But things like Kindle and other ebooks and so forth, they tend to lose all of that because of the surface nature of the book, and it's not that easy to navigate back and forth, and then your likelihood of saying, okay, this book is in the citations, I'm going to go and get that next, it goes down, and plus you have speed of implementation law behind you, and so the longer that it takes between you and actually taking action on that, the less likely you are to do it. So libraries, awesome for speed of implementation and rhythm, because you can then find the next book. You can take piles of books to wherever you have to go and read, and you can actually go through chains of association very, very quickly, very, very powerfully, and in ways that will serve your brain. So second law, speed of implementation plus rhythm. It's got to be that way. Let's check in with our crowd here. So Random Weeb says, just joined. Can you give a brief explanation of what you talked about before? Yes, absolutely, gladly. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't already, and if you're joining us, let me know where in the world you are and what you're doing, what you're thinking. And so what we talked about is, well, we're talking about the 3 universal rules of how to learn fast and effectively. And the first rule was to be all in. So go watch the replay for all the details, but being all in is huge, and there's some details around that we talked about, and some of the discussion points that came up from you guys was awesome, so check that out. Then the second point is that we want to have speed of implementation, know what that is, and get it on our side, and do it rhythmically. Put rhythm on it, so follow the chains and follow them rhythmically. So you've got to let yourself be bounced around from book to book to book, rhythmically show up and use the speed of implementation to keep the rhythm going. Chris says verse 41 in the Tao Te Ching, wise student hears of the Tao and immediately embodies it. Medium student hears of it, retains some, forgets some. Foolish student hears of the Tao and laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it be not the Tao, or not be the Tao. Okay, well, that's interesting. Thank you for that, Chris. Linda says, that cup, where do I get it, bro? Please. You mean the magnetic memory method cup? That's at magneticmemorymethod.com/swag. And yeah, if you don't have a magnetic memory method cup, I'll show you some other time. They're cool, but they sell out really fast, and I only do it once in a while. So go to magneticmemorymethod.com/swag, and you can get yourself a cup. So Chris says, it is about speed of implementation in a 2,500-year-old book. That's right, that's right. So, and by the way, the Tao Te Ching is really fascinating. If you want a really cool book, Wayne Dyer actually has commentary on the Tao Te Ching, and I think that you need to read it. If you're really interested in the Tao, read Wayne Dyer's commentary. He's got an audiobook version of it. It's really, really amazing. And so I think that's worth repeating, Chris. Wise student hears of the Tao and immediately embodies it. Medium student hears of it, retains some, forgets some. Foolish student hears of the Tao and laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it not be the Tao. Well, interesting. Julie's here. Hi, Julie. Hi from California. I love these live feeds. Do you try to do one every week? And is it usually on Tuesdays in the U.S.? Thank you. Well, Julie, there's no rhyme or reason to these or particular schedule. What we want to encourage is that people are subscribed to this channel, and that when they see my name, they're ready to act, because we're living in the new rule, and the classroom a little bit different. Scheduling, I found, doesn't work. People don't get the emails, they don't show up. So we've got to try different things. Replays are there for people who miss it, but this is valuable, and you know, if you're lucky and you take action, speed of implementation with rhythm, and you follow these emails, and you actually unsubscribe from a lot of junk that prevents people from checking their email at all. Have a healthy email, and you're more likely to take action on the things you value. Now, I'm not saying you have to value this, but if you do value it, use schedules, because it doesn't work in the 21st century. Show up to scheduled events. More people show up to unscheduled ones, and actually the quality of interaction. So it's like spontaneous rock concerts in educational form. And if you have suggestions for a better way to do it, then I will. And probably with a management team and so forth, and high ticket can fill stadiums. I don't know. We'll see where this goes. But the question, and thank you for being here. I know it's a bit frustrating. I'm frustrated too. Like I mentioned already, Roberto Blake has to watch YouTube live replays from, and there's a couple other guys. The only option I have, because I'm just not awake at that time. I'm in Australia, and you got to protect your and so forth. But I do tend to try to do one a week, and when that I do it, maybe tends to be or Thursday, but it depends. I like to keep a little bit of randomness to it, and also I've got to have something to say. You know, I've got to have something to say, and fortunately, there's enough participants who feed me interesting things to say. But if there's nothing to say, no point in doing it. Also, I've had some failed lives recently, and that's because I'm trying to use a software called OBS, which lets me have your chat screen up there. And you know, speaking of speed of implementation and rhythm and actually being all in, well, part of the problem is that I still haven't figured out exactly the problem, but I think it's that the video card on my laptop is is broken, so I got to go and get it fixed or get a new laptop. But I'm going to keep on pushing that until I figure out how to do these lives the way that I want them to be, which is your chats up on the screen so everybody can participate. Although, if people don't use it that much, then maybe this is the better thing for me to just be reading those chats out. Anyway, the reason why I'm sharing all this with you is because it directly applies to the actual lesson here, which is you got to be all in, speed of implementation, and rhythm. And so there is a rhythm to how I release videos and so forth on the internet, and I am all in on growing and developing and nurturing this YouTube channel. But at the same time, be all in does not necessarily mean have a strict rhythm, because I have a particular thing in life and I don't live the story of the bipolar disorder, but I do have health issues and I have to take care of myself and make sure that I don't fall prey to workaholism and so forth, which I have in my blood, a certain workaholism, which is not healthy and never going to serve everybody. So that's really, really important to just let you guys know about all that. And at the end of the day, I'm able to actually identify these rules because I live them, and I've been fortunate enough to have lived them so I can share them with you. So Magnus says, really interesting to listen to you, Anthony. Thank you for letting me know, Magnus. David says, hi, Anthony, watching from Brisbane. Are you still here? Yes, I'm here. This is Brisbane. Brisbane right there. Brisbane right here. Brisbane all around. I love it here. Really nice. And if you're here, David, I'm trying to figure out, actually, speaking of learning and speed of implementation, what would be the most likely and high margin Indigenous Aboriginal language to learn in Brisbane where I could satisfy a number of conditions, which would be actually being able to speak it with people, hear it regularly enough. If there's a writing system, whether it's Indigenous or imposed by people later, I want one with a writing system, and so on. And also, be able to write in that, because reading, writing, speaking, and listening are so essential to actually, like, memorizing the stuff is one thing, but then getting into the use, it needs these other things, and it works really, really well. So what I have to do is later today go to the library, because no one's giving me a straight answer. They're giving me lots of cool answers, and I'm very blessed that I have some students and former readers in Australia, or current readers, or whatever, people who've read my books that I know personally who've gotten great results with the magnetic memory method. They're giving me lots of links to different stuff about Aboriginal languages, but I have to do speed of implementation. Like, I can't wait. I got to keep going, got to keep pressing it. So I'm going to go to the library, I'm going to talk to the librarian and say, help me figure this out, put books in my hand, find the people, and I got to keep pushing it until I can build a rhythm around it and actually keep going, because otherwise the speed of implementation rule will kill it. It will kill it just by virtue of nature. So, by telling you this, then you can check in on me and say, hey, what's happening with that Aboriginal language learning project, But it's just the same rules apply to me as they apply to everybody else. So you got to be all in. So I decided to be all in. How did I do it? Well, as I talked about at the beginning, I found as many people as I could who could help guide me. Not all of them have answered their emails, but I'm very fortunate that some have, like Lynn Kelly, the author of The Memory Code. Well, great. She answered me, gave me some suggestions, and I'm trying to build now speed of implementation and a structure and a rhythm around that. And so I need to keep pushing it with speed of implementation and getting that structure going so it can actually happen. No one else is going to do it. So that's the other rule of being all in. You're the only one who can be all in. You have to set the rules of engagement, and you have to really, really understand that you're the only one who can. And you have to understand the rules of nature that are against you. So that is speed of implementation. Pink Rhythm says, how's the title and author? Can someone write it here? Thank you. So I was mentioning Richard Wiseman, which is Wiseman, Wiseman, 59 seconds. And 59, I think you can just put the numbers into Google, 59 and seconds. You'll love that book. So yeah, I can't type it now, but someone can type that in if they like. We were also mentioning Tao Te Ching, which I believe is Lao Tzu, and I was talking about Wayne Dyer's commentary on that, and so I'm not really sure what the title of Wayne Dyer's commentary is, but it certainly got Tao Te Ching in there. Now, of course, Tao Te Ching is spelt differently depending on who is doing the spelling. But Google can usually sort these things out and follow the speed of implementation rule. pick one of these, and by the end of the day, own it and have started reading it, and then decide when you're going to read tomorrow and how much you're going to read. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you do it exactly that way, but by putting those conditions in place, you're much more likely to follow through and keep following through. Put some kind of rhythm around it. So I'm going to read this every day for X amount of minutes until that the book is done. If you don't do that, speed of implementation law will destroy you. I mean, I don't mean to be so dramatic, but it is. It's decay. And it's decay that's happening in time if we don't follow the speed of implementation rule. So let's see. Julie says, I always feel like I hit the jackpot when I catch you live. Oh, thank you, Julie. That makes me feel wonderful. I feel that way too when I get on live with people that I admire and want to hang around with and spend time with. And, you know, participation is everything. It really helps keep this going because we have this unique moment right now in the world of the internet where we can actually interact with teachers in a way that just isn't possible, or never was possible before. And yeah, there's a little bit of a payment in terms of it's unstructured, it's off the cuff a little bit, and the replay doesn't work nearly that well, although that's your attitude. That's your decision whether it works well or not. And there is a benefit in terms of seeing thinking out loud demonstrated. And we need more of that because digital amnesia is real. I prefer to call it digital amnesia, but other people are calling it digital dementia, and that's a more negative reading of it. I think we can recover from amnesia. That's why I use that one. Dementia we can't recover from, so I don't use that one. And I want to help people with digital amnesia, and long-form content is one of the ways to do it. And not always live, but live demonstrations of thinking out loud according to a loose plan are very useful, and show up to them. They're really, really good for your brain. We talked about why earlier. Magnus says, wish, could you offer a course in speed learning where you are an active teacher that we can interact with, run over a couple of weeks? That is possible. Let me think it through. For now, in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, there's a course called the Master Plan. It has everything in it that I know about speed learning from the memory angle, which is the only angle anyway, because if you don't remember it, you haven't learned it. So how doesn't matter how fast it is if you don't remember it, right? So that's why I jokingly call it slow reading, because really speed reading is nothing if you don't remember it. It's useless. And there's a lot of people out there who are hypnotizing themselves into, oh, I can speed read. I can read this many minutes, blah, 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 blah. What does that number matter if you don't have the treasure at the end? It's nothing. So I'm not sure I would call it speed learning. I call it something else. I call it the magnetic memory method. And it's all available. Now, in terms of doing it with an active teacher you can interact with, that's a very tricky thing for the reasons that I've already talked about. People don't open their emails in time. They don't take action on them in time, partly because that's just life. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. But in order to get enough people on a live thing and then actually have them show up to that is a challenge that I've done before, and it works to varying degrees and so forth. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, here's the rule about memory techniques. It's self-study and it's self-practice. It's something you're either all in for or you're not. And there's no between. Nobody can do the training for you. You can do it in groups in terms of learning together, maybe speaking about the different angles with each other, and that's totally possible. And I've had students in rooms together. I've done it in Vienna, I've done it in Berlin, I've done it in London. I haven't done it in Australia yet, but if somebody wants to help me put it together, let's do it. But it's not going to be a deviation from the fact that memory techniques are in your head. They're in your memory. And that means a certain amount of separation from the world to sit down with information, be it difficult information or simple information, and apply how you're going to get this in here. You cannot avoid that. And people try to avoid it in every possible way. They're constantly putting obstacles between themselves and learning. That's what this video today is about. The 3 universal rules to learn fast and effectively. and it's be all in and understand that you alone are always the only one who can show up and do it and set the goal and set the milestones toward the goal. And that loneliness in it is just part of what you have to accept, you have to absorb. And if you find community along the way, that's great, but community isn't the answer. Certainly not with memory techniques, because the community comes from after you've learned the technique and you've gained some traction with the skills, and you're able to say to the world, this is how it works. And now you share back and you explain. Because one of the things that you do to master memory techniques is you tell others how you did it, what you did, how that you're still refining the process, and away you go. So Magnus says, I'll buy the master plan. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting you in there. For anybody who wants to follow suit, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/store. All the information is there, and understand that this is self-study. Once you're in the master class, you get the full deal. Master plan is just the master plan, which is great in and of itself. But in terms of the master class, you get the FAQ section. You will see that every question under the sun has been answered, and there will be more answers tailor-made to you if you demonstrate that you have a question that hasn't been answered before already. And it's a really wonderful place. I mean, I'm not going to toot my own horn about it, but I think it's a wonderful place because of the quality of the questions that come from people who are on the path. It's really, really amazing what that happens. And then we do, about quarterly, we do show up, and we have the opportunity to do a session together. But again, it's very, very difficult getting people to show up. And even if you were to announce it months in advance, as Magnus is suggesting, I'm perfectly willing to keep working on that and get it right and so forth. But I think really the answer is still just to be honest and ethical about what memory techniques are. And memory techniques are not about group learning. They're about individual learning, and then you join the group, right? It's just kind of the way that is. Because the group is just a deviation from showing up and learning the techniques, because you can't memorize information with a group around you anyway. You've got to show up with the book, show up with whatever it is that you're learning, and then encode it. So, yesterday when I went and made my Chinese video, I'm just sitting there on the bench, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to share with people what I did. And even though I was with my wife, I said, hey, how do you say this? She told me, and then I encoded it and so forth. Well, actually, in some sense, my poor wife, she's just sitting there, and I'm not talking with her. I'm just like, okay, so there's Lee jeans, and then there's a kite, and then E.T. is there, and there's a teacup full of yen, and then Che Guevara, Zola is first, then Che Guevara, and then there's Sherba. It's totally in your mind. It's in your mind, and it's at the exclusion of others. Coming together makes sense once you're on the path. That's called the World Memory Championships. It's called memory competition, if that's what you want. Now, I think that I could provide an alternative to that, because I don't deal with training people for memory championships, and I don't see the point of that, because I'm about language learning. I'm about applying this to things that matter, that get you a better job, that get you ahead in your personal life, so you feel awesome. You have confidence, you have power, you have the ability to symbolize better in your society because you can remember someone's name. And it's just going to happen by showing up to self-study and self-practice and making that sacrifice of a little bit of alone time. So when I was talking earlier on this live about going to the library and stuff, that's not with your pals, it's not with your brothers and sisters. That's you showing up to knowledge in the only way that you can, which is with silence, with meditation, with cultivation of thoughts and ideas, with interaction, with pens and notebooks. I mean, look, I'm so notebook crazy, I got more. It's not about one notebook, it's about notebooks and being in there. Forgive me, I got to drink once in a while, but you got to show up as you. You got to be all in, which was our first universal rule. Our second universal rule was that you've got to have speed of implementation, and then you've got to put rhythm around speed of implementation. I want to catch up with some of our, wow, we got lots of comments here. Thank you guys for that. If you're showing up live now, hit that thumbs up button. Let me know where you are in the world. Keep this rolling. And see if I can find the last comments here. So, whoa, wow, we got a lot. Some people are having connection issues. I'm very sorry about that. Just sometimes if you just refresh the page and come back in, that will happen. And it can be on my side as well. I think that there's a problem here with the internet. I'm gonna call them. Anyway, sorry about that. I mean, we still have the miracle though, right? Still pumping. And there's always the replay. Linda says, swag, thanks, will do. Thanks, bro. Well, thank you. Yeah, and if you do get a teacup or a coffee cup or whatever, send me a picture. Love to see that. If you want a coffee cup, Magnetic Memory Method coffee cup, go to magneticmemorymethod.com/swag, which is SWAG, and really appreciate that. That obviously helps support this work, but it's really for you to remember your commitment to remembering. And if you have a coffee cup and you drink from it, it's going to remind you, oh yeah, I wanted to work on my memory, and it's going to push you in that direction. If you have a t-shirt, it's going to remind you, oh yeah, you can go in that direction. I used to have a lovely t-shirt with Ganesh on it, and yeah, it's an elephant. And why? Well, it reminds me of the beauty and the glory of memory. So these things have a role in our lives, and I'd be delighted to see you with your coffee cup or shirt or whatever. So magneticmemorymethod.com/swag. Let's see. So Ricardo is asking the points up till now, and Chris jumped in to say some of those things. Great. Thank you, Chris, for helping out. Thanks, Random Weave, for the stuff about OBS problems. I'm going to check that out. And thank you for helping each other out in the chat. Magnus, thanks for the title, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, The Complete Tao Te Ching, and Affirmations by Wayne Dyer. I haven't actually read the physical book. I went for the audiobook because I love his voice and listening to him speak. So really great. Check that out. Speed of implementation, remember? Go buy it now. Have at least part of it read by the end of the day and a plan for how you're going to finish reading it over the week or however long you think it will take. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just make an estimation. If I read 20 pages for the rest of the week, I will have this done. That kind of thing. Powerful, powerful, powerful. So, J.A.'s here. Hey, good to see you always. I'm glad that you're here. David says, I'm a masterclass member and love it. Still early, but learning and trying to implement. That's great to hear, David. And if you're here in Brisbane, let's do coffee. That would be awesome. Always happy to meet with masterclass members, owners, whatever you call it. It's not really a membership. It's a training product. And once you're in the family, you're in. J.A. says, I like the topic today. It's self-study. That's very true. Yes. And self-study. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Very, very true, J.A. Very, very true. However, well, no, let's not get into that. I was just going to say you can lead them to the water and keep them there until they're thirsty enough that they have to drink, which unfortunately is what ends up happening to a lot of people, is that they see that the water was there all along, but they are already so dehydrated that they won't be able to reach out for it, and they're dead in the water, as they say. Memory Hub's here. Great to hear from you, Memory Hub. Memory Hub has had some amazing adventures and comments that he documented on the YouTube channel on some of the previous videos. And what I want to point out about that is that that's a great way to learn, is to document what you're doing and to do so in a way that contributes to the larger conversation. It's good for you, your memory, and it has the effect of supporting this conversation, making sure that more and more people are drawn to it and attracted to it, and that we're able to keep this wonderful tradition going, because it only keeps going because we are actively keeping it alive. We perform knowledge, and it's lucky. The more we have people performing the knowledge in a living way, then the more luck that we have. And I chose this card today to symbolize our three principles, because it's got sort of a shamrocky sort of look there. And lucky three, lucky shamrock, and so forth. But we create luck. And another book by Richard Wiseman is The Luck Factor. And really, luck is something you decide to do. You be all in, follow the exercises in the book as I have done, and then you. He doesn't talk about speed of implementation in that book. As far as I know, he doesn't talk about speed of implementation at all. It's a concept from business, but it applies to learning just as much as anything. But certainly, he talks about in 59 seconds putting structure around the implementation that you do, and that increases your luck. You make your luck, right? And self-study is like that. Anyway, Memory Hub is increasing his luck by participating in the conversation, and he's putting rhythm around it the more that he shows up to do it and have discussion, and he's here now, and he's got some discussion. So let's read what Memory Hub has to say. Hey, Anthony, I like the concept of the speed of implementation. I think it's a great way to find balance in your life by testing out different ideas or techniques you may have heard or learned about. That's right. And by the way, there was a great French philosopher and social critic named Roland Barthes. And Roland Barthes, he had a book called S/Z. And in it, he made a radical suggestion. Well, it was not only in that book, actually, but that's where I remember encountering it, which is that you don't have to read books from beginning to end. You don't have to read an entire book in order to get great value from it. You could test the water with books. And one of the things that I always like to do, it's part of what I would call slow reading, not speed reading, but it's part of speed learning, learning really, really fast. Because, you get more from being a bit more methodical. Method always slows you down, and then that's what speeds you up. I know I'm being a bit ironic here, but that's the truth of it at the end of the day. And so read the conclusion first and see if that author concludes on anything worth following the path that the author took to get to that conclusion. It doesn't always work because not all conclusions are built the same. But nonetheless, it's a good rule of thumb to look at the conclusion and see if that conclusion is profound enough to follow the journey up to how that conclusion was reached. Oh, well, that conclusion doesn't look like it's worth the time to see how the author provided evidence in support of that claim. Now, don't give up on the conclusion right away. Read the introduction as well. Read the table of contents and all that sort of stuff, and check it out more fully. But you don't have to read the entire book, and you don't have to read books in order. It does make sense to do so, though, at the end of the day, because there's a reason that the author and through the editorial process it was created that way. There's a reason why linear thinking persists and why it continues to be valuable. And there's a reason why that there's all kinds of avant-garde movies and things like the Memento and so forth, but there's a reason why they're not mainstream, and it's because there's just not enough value in stretching our minds for a linear exposure to the development of ideas and narrative and so forth. We live in time in a linear fashion, and we think very much in a linear fashion, or at least we produce thought in a linear fashion. And even though there's a lot to the rhizomatic concept, which I talk about in the master plan, the rhizomatic concept still plays out in a linear fashion. And so there's still value in showing up to knowledge in linear fashion and submitting yourself to the linear fashion, even if you could argue that actually everything's alinear, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, you really want to understand that things are, at some level, they are in a linear fashion, and when the fold happens, as some of the French philosophers call it, that fold will still have a linear character to it. And the more powerful you are in linear knowledge, then the more you're going to be able to cope with alinear knowledge, and perhaps vice versa, but my chips are on linear knowledge. In any case, Memory Hub says, I think it allows you to come to conclusions about whether to continue using the techniques or ideas or cut them out in order to keep the balance within your life. That's true as long as you're all in. And as we talked about at the beginning, there's a characteristic to being all in that is super important. So, J.A. says, back to our point about community, community isn't the answer. Be your own community, or as we say around here, eat your own dog food. Ooh, well, that's something to remember. I don't think we have to eat our own dog food. I'm not sure if that relates to the phrase "a dog's breakfast" or whatever, but in any case, I don't know if it has to be that vile. But what we want to really understand is that there is maybe something to the idea of using your own territory in a way that may soil your own territory, and then learning to clean it up in your own territory before you go outward. That's like music lessons, right? I was talking about the relationship between learning Chinese and music in the last video that I released yesterday. And, one of the great music teachers that I had, he said, look, just learn the scale as fast as you can and clean it up later. Know where the notes are and practice landing on them as fast as you can, and then go back and clean it up later. And clean it up when? In the music lesson? No. You clean it up when you're at home practicing by yourself. And then you come back and you show the teacher what you did, and you show your fellow band members, if you're playing in a band, what you did and how you can land it now. But you don't do the practice in the rehearsal room. You don't do the practice in the recording studio. You do it on your own. You do it on your own. So community isn't the answer, but community is the end point. Community is where you take it after you get the skill. This is what Plato was talking about in the allegory of the cave, right? You're tied to the wall. The world is illusion. Somehow you find your way out. You turn around and you see that there's this fire and there's these dudes with puppets that are casting shadows on the wall. You find a way to release yourself. Maybe you discover that it's actually soldiers that are making these puppets, or moving the puppets that are casting the shadows on the wall, and you thought that those shadows were reality, but really what you saw was just shadows from the light of the fire. And then you ask these guys for help, and they're like, get out of here, kid. Get back to the wall or whatever. And then you start to perceive that there's actually a light behind the fire, and it's hurting your eyes. And oh my God, the pain is so terrible, but you're still attracted to it. And you move step by step closer to the light. And the next thing you realize is, wait, this is all happening in a cave. And there's a passage out of the cave. But in order to follow this passage, I have to move closer and closer to this light. And the closer I get to the light, the hotter the light is. And the more it burns me. And yet somehow the more it casts away the darkness and burns away the dead oak. And oh my goodness, before you know it, you're actually out of the cave. And now you're standing beneath the light of the sun. And there's only one conclusion when you have the sun in its fullest glory. And that is that you go back down into the cave and you fight those soldiers to get to the other people who are tied to the wall, living in the world of illusions. And you take them up into the light. And they will spit on you. And they will punch you and strike at you. They will disbelieve you, or they will write nasty comments on your Facebook page or on your YouTube comments, or they will hit the thumb down button or whatever snarky little waste of time graffiti things that they do. And they will resist. But you just keep going back to the light to replenish yourself, to burn off the pain, to burn off the ignorance that pain brings, and then you bring the light back down. So community is the destination, but isolation and solo journey to the light is the path. It's how you get there. That's what memory techniques are, is that journey to the light. And then you've got to bring it back. You've got to. Because what's the point of memorizing anything if you're not going to bring it back, you know? So Magnus says, very interesting, how to learn and memorize the vocabulary of any language. Yeah, well, that's part of the masterclass. And it's a course that thousands upon thousands of people have taken. And when you get this, and you show up and you go to the light, then you have this, and then you come back with fluency and skill. So J.A. says, I prefer your preaching, Anthony. Well, thank you. I don't see it as preaching, although there's obviously there is a kind of hallelujah element to all good news, put it that way. And what do we love more than the professor or the teacher who is teaching because they care and they have this light inside of them. They've embodied some of the fire. They're not hired by the government to give you tests on Monday based on what you did over the weekend. That's just whatever. I mean, we have school for reasons and yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, we want to escape those teachers as soon as possible. And we want to have real teachers as much as we can along the way, which is what's so cool about the internet. And so many dangerous things are happening with the internet right now, and we've got to get together and we've got to bind together. And so that's why, hit the thumbs up, leave comments on the teachers that you care about, support their work, get their stuff, buy their swag, whatever. Make it Make it happen. Because if you don't, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it. Net neutrality, all this kind of stuff. You've got to support the people that you care about. You've got to. And there's many ways to do it. There's many ways to do it. And one of them is to follow the universal principles of learning with the people who you want to learn from. So be all in. Put rhythm around it. Know the speed of implementation rule. And the third point is that and it's really just the same as the first two, you've got to understand that chaos is everywhere, and you have to understand that what you're doing is you're forming meaning out of chaos by organizing your life to support being all in, fighting, speed of implementation, and having rhythm. So it's the same but different. So what that means is that you've got to have a plan, and you've got to protect the plan, because everything under the sun is going to happen to move you off course. It's going to happen regularly. It's going to happen with greater irregularity is going to happen with greater regularity than you could ever possibly plan for. And yet you must show up with the plan and maintain the plan. Does that make sense? Give me a hell yeah and a thumbs up and a comment if that makes sense to you. Because that is exactly what you've got to do. And you've got to do it often and regularly. You've got to tend the garden. So you're all in. You've done all the things we talked about at the beginning to be all in, to test the be all inness of your innessness, if I can put it that way. And then you've got to understand the speed of implementation rule. And you've got to implement, and you've got to implement now. And then you've got to keep going. And then you've got to put structure and rhythm around the implementation. And then when you finish that book, or as much of that book as you're going to finish, have the next book in place with the speed of implementation rule. And then you've got to have the next one and the next one. And you've got to show up rhythmically. Read books rhythmically. Leaders are readers. Even if you're not going to be a leader, readers are the rulers of just their own lives, right? And then you've got to have plans that you maintain. Maintain the plans. So Antonio says, Anthony, I'm from Brazil and I love your channel. I hope it gets more subs. Thank you, Antonio. And you can help that by just keep hitting that likes up button. Put more comments on the replays, on the non-replay video, or whatever, the pre-recorded videos. Make sure you're subscribed to my actual website. Support the podcast. More subscribers come, the more the subscribers that we have participate. And understand speed of implementation. You've got to do this now because net neutrality and a whole bunch of other stuff we won't get into are threatening this. Freedom of speech, I can't believe in 2018 that freedom of speech is in so much danger around the world, but in first world countries. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And only we together can fight it. So if you want, as you're saying, Antonio, if you want me to get more subscribers, take action and do it with the speed of implementation, which means now, right away, and with rhythm. Show up as much as you can. And you know what? I understand the way the world works. I sometimes get bored of the teachers I follow too. I haven't listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast for a long time, and sometimes I go back to it. And when I go back to it, I support it. But when I support it, I'm all in. And same thing with Sam Harris. You know, like Sam Harris has contributions from me, not just contributions in terms of, you know, all the triggers and talking about him and making sure people know I'm a fan of him and yada yada yada, but also actually putting some skin in the game, supporting the thing financially, making sure I bought all his books, etc., etc. And if he ever comes to a place where I am or where I can be, then I'll be there. I wish that I could get to Vancouver it's only for subscribers. Sorry, you got to be his subscriber to know about the thing in Vancouver. Whoops. Anyway, no, he'll notify it eventually to the wider public, but people who are subscribers get advance tickets, and you know, maybe this is the sort of thing that I should do as well in terms of doing live stuff for memory training. But in any case, I wish that I could be there because they're talking about freedom of speech and they're talking about the threat and what we're going to do about that threat. And what we're going to do about that threat is we're going to get together, we're going to learn how to learn better, and we're going to preserve our freedom of speech, because if we don't have freedom of speech, we don't have freedom of thought. And if we don't have freedom of thought, there's no point in learning how to remember stuff because you won't be able to express it. And that is a very, very dangerous thing. And there are already laws in first world countries like Canada that will fine you or even put you in prison for speaking your mind. And that is a very sad thing indeed. It's a crime against humanity. History has shown us just how terrible that is. So let's get together, let's stop this, and let's let memory techniques thrive and survive and be part of the solution. Because if we don't, we're in great trouble indeed. And we've got to fight the good fight about that. And it's not necessarily my topic, and yet it is that topic. And I loathe the day that I'll have to release a video on how to learn and memorize. I'm not even going to say it because it's just terrible. It's totally anti-intellectual, and unfortunately, intellectualism, as it's been structured, has been part of this. Anyway, guys, that's my 3 universal principles for how to learn faster and more effectively, and to rehearse. This is now the time, if you have any more questions or comments that you want to share, to pop them in, and they can be about anything related to memory techniques, general learning, and so forth. But winding down, or going as long as you like if you're going to pump this up with some questions or comments for more discussion. The first universal principle is to be all in. Again, these principles are not necessarily in linear order, although they certainly do have a linear structure to them. It's to be all in. And you be all in partly by doing a bit of research about what it is you want to be all in about, finding out who the key players are, figuring out, doing a little preparatory research. Is this what I want to be all in for? If it's what I want to be all for, how many steps can I know that I'm going to need to complete and get a good picture going on? The map's not the territory, but create a little bit of the map and then document the process as you go along. Second part, which is related to the first part, is speed of implementation, knowing that you have a limited amount of time to take action on things before entropy will take over and remove action and the potential for action from your life. So an example would be, I say, hey, read Richard Wiseman's 59 Seconds. You've got, some people say 72 hours, some people say 48 hours, some people say 24 hours. I say you've got less than that. You've got that amount of time to say, hey, that sounds like a good book, I'm going to go look it up. And within an hour, it should be on your Kindle device, or it should be on its way to your home. Ideally, you go to a bookstore and it's there, or you go to the library and it's there, and then you start reading it, and then you have a plan for how you're going to finish reading it. And then you find one more book from that book that you're going to read, or you have another book that you're going to read already in place so that you're going to do it. And you know what? If you don't have a plan for yourself, you can hire other people to give you plans. So I've joined one from Michael Hyatt. He sends me 2 books a month. I read them. I don't have to think about what the next book is. And how did I do it? Well, he sent out an email and said, hey, I got this plan for your reading for the next year. Here's where to get it. So I didn't think about it too much. I just said, I'm all in and I'm going to do it. And so the reading plan is there. If you want a reading plan from me, I've got that for subscribers to my newsletter. Every month I send you something to read, and we have the Seal of Approval Book Club. All of that's available to you at magneticmemorymethod.com/connect, and you can do that. And I'll give you a reading plan, and you'll get some videos showing you what are the most important points from those books. Those books are all related to memory and memory techniques, and that's just for those people who are interested in that. And I know it's not for everybody, so no, there's no digital version, although you do get the videos in digital version, but the newsletter is in print, and it's been really an interesting thing, and the way that it helps people helps them because they're dealing with digital overwhelm, digital amnesia, and it's been just wonderful. So there's that option for you, and it's just an example. So speed of implementation requires you to take action. You hear something, that's for me, make sure, don't wait for 72 hours. Get it done as fast as possible and have a plan for completion. If you can't come up with a plan, other people have plans for you. It's called curriculum, and that's why we take courses. We take courses. It doesn't matter if it's all free on the internet. It's not free. Nothing's free. Everything requires you to show up, and if you want guided curriculum from people who've been along the path before, well, part of being all in and doing your preparation is testing. Is that person really someone who has been there before? Are they really walking the walk? Are they talking the talk? Or have they done so in the past to a sufficient degree that they're really worth following, so that I am implementing something that's worth following? Now, you're not going to get it right every time, and you shouldn't get all, your heart broken if that from time to time there's a book or a course you take that isn't for you. There's nothing wrong with you, and there's probably nothing wrong with the course. It might be a bit of timing. It may be that that course is not sensitive to every single learning style. There's at least 6 different learning styles. Well, there's 4 learning styles, and there's at least 6 different sensory modes. There may be more than that. I talk about all these things and help you identify them for yourself in my training, so that you know what you're doing and how to do it. And it's really empowering to have these things. And I really want to get into that. Really invest in yourself and understand that not everything is bad because it didn't work for you. It might be timing, it might be that they're just speaking to a different learning type. But the more you know about your learning types and your sensory modes, then the more that you're able to actually learn from anything. It's really powerful. So Julie says, oh yeah, well, let me finish the summary here. So yeah, we got speed of implementation, we got putting rhythm around it, and then there's planning and maintaining the plan, because the world is chaos and it's always going to throw deviations at you. So you have to be devoted to maintaining the plan. And that's done through daily rituals and so forth. So this is where Julie says, so to expect there will be distractions, chaotic energy, and not to be dissuaded by it or shocked by it, but plan in spite of it. Exactly. That's exactly right. And take it a step further, Julie. Keep the plan in spite of it, but also operate and live in such a way that you learn how to turn the chaos into your assistant, into your aid. Learn from it. Study the chaos. Understand it for what it is in the contexts in which it emerges. So that might be a little bit mystical, so let's break it down to something more concrete. I know, for example, that Saturday morning is not Friday morning, right? So I know that at 6 a.m. there's going to be noise outside because they're starting the market. And if I didn't have powers of observation, I'd just be living in a world of chaos and be wondering, why is it that once in a while there's like this noise at 6 a.m.? But by studying and observing and cross-indexing it, it's not really chaos. It's actually got a pattern. It's got a rhythm. And you'll find that most of the things that disrupt us have a pattern or a chaos. Not most of them, but a significant amount of them do. And if we then come to them with intelligence and observation, we can then come up with plans. So that means, you know what? It sucks to go to bed earlier on Friday night, but gonna get a better sleep if that I do. And so, or understand that by not going to sleep early enough on Friday, there's going to be less sleep because of that disruption come Saturday morning, and then not be angry about it, not be frustrated about it, not spend undue energy on grumpiness about that, which is what we often do. We get all grumpy about things we actually can't change. And if you are going to be grumpy about it, at least know why you're being grumpy about it and how you're being grumpy about it, and just own it. Own it. There's probably better examples of that, and there are many of them, but having a daily ritual so that you fend off the chaos of the world is just something that gives you the opportunity to understand what that chaos is. So another example is a lot of people, they have an app beside their bed, a phone. They pick it up, and then they start looking at Facebook, they start looking at email and all that sort of stuff. They're still in bed. Come on, like that's no better way to surrender yourself to chaos than that. What you do is you don't have any of those devices anywhere near your bed. At the most, you have a little dream journal or whatever, and you start to write, or you read a novel, or you do anything but giving yourself over to chaos. You start the computer after the most important things that don't involve computers are done. So meditation, stretching, drinking water, brushing your hair, these are my things. I don't turn the computer on until those things are done. This is so powerful. And without that, chaos takes over. And then you're just bopped around like in a pinball machine. Oh, this email. Oh, that video. No. You schedule time for that so that it can't be chaotic. But you don't treat it as chaos. You understand why it's chaos, and then you put frames and borders around it. So I hope that gives you some more to work with, Julie. Memory Hub says, have you ever combined the major system with the PAO, and do you think they are necessary to have individually? Yeah, well, I don't really get the whole attraction with the PAO, but I think it's really for competition. That's from Memory Hub. Thank you for that. Um, Look, I think it's just too inflexible for everyday use to have a PAO. And essentially, major is a PAO in different form. There's not really that much difference to them. It's just more flexible. But what I'd rather do is take a major method 00 to 99 or 00 to whatever, and then think, okay, so what is it that 59 is going to be doing? Jennifer Lopez. Jennifer Lopez is always going to be leaping. Why? Well, because lope and leap also build on the foundation of the major, right? So now if we're going to have an object, what could be that object that also builds on the foundation of the major? So we have our PAO, right? And then there's just so many options on how to use the PAO. And the advantage of using those options systematically are relative to the outcome. So if it's competition for speed, then there's a way of using that very systematically and rigidly that will serve the outcome of speed. If it's for longevity, then those things are not really going to work nearly as well. If it's for a language learning component, then there's no the point. There's no real point of it at all because you want to have other tools. So that's where I was saying earlier before. There's like microscopic advantages to know the differences, and then there are structural larger ones. So I think that they're already sufficiently combined, but then you need to think about your strategy for the outcome that you want. So I don't think it's necessary to have them individually. I think it's counterproductive for most people in most cases. Memory Hub says, have I ever tried MentorBox? No, but I have Michael Hyatt's LeaderBox. I'm thinking about how that I can do something for memory in that same sense, but the version that I have right now is called the Magnetic Memory Method Seal of Approval. The way that you get the seal of approval is by being subscribed to the Magnetic Memory Method newsletter, and that is the print newsletter, and I may open it up in the future to non-newsletter subscribers, but that will be in the future after at least a year of doing it. So we have gone through a number of books. Those books are private to subscribers, and we'll be continuing to go through a number of books, and those books are unlike MentorBox or LeaderBox. Those books are up to you to acquire on your own, because there's no monetarily fiscal manner for me yet to get them to you, although there may be in the future. And with the support of all of you, that future may come sooner than you think. But for now, that's the way that works. And I've designed it in such a way that you don't have to read the books in order to benefit from the seal of approval. And that's from my philosophy that I got when I was a student at the European Graduate School, where the wonderful Wolfgang Schermacher said the job of the professor is to sell you on reading the book, not to tell you what you read. Yeah? So I think that is really, really, really important. And that way you can have a meaningful discussion based on a book that you were so informed about that you just had to read for yourself. But even if you didn't, you were sufficiently informed enough of the bigger picture that you had something to go on. And so my goal is to sell you on those books and give you something to go on, even if you don't, but in a way that still honors the integrity of those authors so that you will go and get those books. And in some cases, you actually can't get those books, or they're very difficult to get. And they may even be written in a way that's just so impenetrable to read. So they really do need unpacking at a more and more in-depth and sufficient level. Anyway, I'm very much in beta with that in some sense, although it's very concrete, and anybody who's interested in it can go to magneticmemorymethod.com/connect. It's not the master class, but it is for people who just don't want to do online learning. The digital amnesia is too much chaos involved in that. So if you need a reading plan, then you're going to get the newsletter once a month, which has tips for you and sample memory palaces created by the best of the best MMM students and other things. It's all there at magneticmemorymethod.com/connect. Okay, so MentorBox, and Julie says yes, that helps clear things up. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here. This was a great time. It was a wonderful discussion. I appreciate all the engagement. Thanks for hitting that thumbs up. If you're watching the replay of this, well, congratulations for coming through to the end again. As I mentioned before, I know replays are not ideal, but I appreciate every single one of you who watches them later, and all of you who stay for any or all of these live. And if you have feedback for me, I'm very open to it. As you may have seen from some previous live attempts, I'm trying to get the OBS thing working. I'm going to persist on it until we get it working. I think I need a new computer, but because I think my video card is just destroyed. I've done so much video. I wouldn't be surprised if that thing is like a broken rag. Anyway, thank you all again for all your engagement, and thanks in particular to those who engaged in the discussion. Thank you for all your thumbs up. And Magnus says thanks. Looking forward to the next hangout, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one as well. And listen, thanks everybody. Visit magneticmemorymethod.com if you haven't before. And until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic.